Hey everyone, Kristen from Made a Better One and Knits here today with a new tutorial-ish kind of thing for you to tell you about the top 5 things I wish I had known when I first started knitting. So whether you are a new knitter or even an experienced one who maybe learned some incorrect rules off the bat, as we sometimes do when we're picking up a new hobby, today I want to talk about 5 important things that I think really would have helped speed up and improve my knitting had I learned them from the very beginning. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Number 1, I did learn about swatching very early on, but something that for some reason is not emphasized or discussed is you have to block your swatch. And by block, I don't mean pin out and stretch, but after you finish your swatch, you are supposed to wash it and lay it flat to dry before you check your gauge. And if you think about that, that makes sense because whatever it is you're knitting, you are probably going to eventually wash it and lay it flat to dry. So you want to tackle your project based on your gauge once it is washed and blocked. Patterns usually just say swatch, but they just don't happen to mention what you're supposed to do after that. So in case you missed it somewhere along the way, yes, after you swatch, you should wash your swatch. You should lay it flat to dry, smooth it out, and when it is dry, that is when you should use it to check your gauge. All right, number 2. I think especially when we are beginners, we are really trying to stick to that pattern that we're using. And if we miss something along the way, we kind of panic and think, oh, now I've got to go back and fix that. And for some things, that's true. But in terms of increasing and decreasing, you can fudge those a little bit. So if you are working on, the body of a sweater and on what should have been your decrease round, you forget, that's okay. You can do it the next round. That's not to say if, you were supposed to do it 10 rounds ago, but if you miss it on one round, it's okay to just do it the next round, more often than not. Yes, the shaping is organized to create a certain proportion, but having it off by a row or a round here or there is not the end of the world. So if you miss your increase or your decrease round or row, or maybe you're supposed to work 4 decreases and you forget and you only work 3, you can do it the next row. It's not going to be the end of the world. You can fudge those. Number 3, you don't knit your bust size. You don't knit your bra size. So definitely when I first started with sweaters, it said 34. That was my bra size. Okay, I'm gonna knit the 34. That's not how it works. That measurement is the finished dimensions of the garment. And for starters, your bra size is not necessarily the same things. The band size, which is the 34 or the 36 or the 38, is your under bust measurement, but that's not what the sweater measurement is. That's the widest point or greatest circumference point at the apex of your bust, which is not the same thing as your under bust measurement. Secondly, sweaters are supposed to usually have some kind of ease. Most often it's positive ease. Sometimes it might be 0 ease, and very occasionally it might be negative ease. But usually you want at least a little bit of positive ease, so you can move around in your sweater. You don't usually want it to be super close fitting. That really depends on the style. There's certainly some styles of garments that you do want to be close fitting at the bust, particularly sometimes sleeveless garments. You want them to be very close fitting at the bust, otherwise your armholes will gape. But generally speaking, the majority of the time sweaters are going to have positive ease. So not only is your finished sweater bust measurement not the same as your under bust measurement, but you also want to add some to that so that your sweater isn't fitting like a glove. It's actually supposed to have some extra. So if perhaps you wear a size 34B bra, you're probably going to want something in a finished bust measurement that's like a 36 or a 38 so that you have more room to move around. And then there's also something to be said in there for cup size and bust darts. There's really just a lot going on that is not discussed very clearly. And certainly there's not enough room in a pattern necessarily to lay it all out. But the most important thing, you're not really going to knit your bra size. Measure yourself, find the measurement for the largest circumference, which is usually like right at the apex of your bust. Find that measurement, add a couple of inches to that, and that's probably what you want to knit for most sweaters, not your bra size. Number 4, you absolutely 100% can join yarn in the middle of a row. This is definitely somewhere I read somewhere along the way when I first started knitting that was, you have to wait until the end of the row or the round to join your yarn. This is not true. And there are good reasons that you might want to do this. For example, if you are knitting something that is seamed, it's a lot easier to hide yarn ends in a seam than it is in the body of a sweater. But in general, it's not necessary. There are a number of ways to create invisible joins so that you can easily join in the middle of a row, and especially in the middle of a round. So usually I don't knit flat a whole lot when I'm working on garments. When I do, I will probably just work to the end of the row to make things easier for myself when it comes to weaving in those ends in a seam. But definitely when I'm working in the round, I am not going to wait until I get back to the beginning of the round if I have to switch yarns, if I have to join a new ball. And that's absolutely fine. You don't have to. I don't know where that myth came from. It is okay to join your yarn in the middle of a row or a round. Just make sure that you are learning the right techniques so that it's invisible and you don't end up with like a weird knot or something in the middle of a row, which would look a little sloppy, but there are numerous techniques out there. I will go ahead and link to one, which is affectionately called spit splicing, but there are lots of different techniques for joining a new ball of yarn that do not require you to work to the end of the row or round. And number 5, the last one, is that yarn labels in terms of lace, fingering, sport, DK, worsted, they don't actually mean that much. They give you a general idea of how thick or thin your yarn is, but I have, in the course of my many now knitting years, run into yarns labeled worsted that are definitely more like a DK, and yarns that are labeled DK that are much more like a worsted, and the same goes for fingering and sport weight. So again, they give you a general idea, but you don't really want to get too caught up in it. If a yarn works nicely at the gauge that you're supposed to be knitting at, then it doesn't really matter whether that yarn is labeled DK or worsted or Aran or whatever it may be. If you're getting gauge and the fabric is appropriate, so though it's not too loose and airy for whatever you're knitting, it's not bulletproof for whatever you're knitting, then it's fine, and you don't need to worry about the exact name that is on your yarn label. So there you have it, the top 5 things I wish I had known when I was first starting to knit. I hope you have found it helpful.